So the Bearded Lady, in a sense, was it really a cultural community center for sort of the next generation of or the beginning of the gender activist time. A lot of art dykes in transition in many different ways, and that was that where, and now Harry was involved in it.
Yeah.
Her girlfriend was involved in it.
At the time, but also for our opening night, Neo Bustamante did a performance there with Stafford and dubbed us a gender-free zone and gave us a certificate that forever was on the top of the refrigerator. And I was just talking to my friend Wade Palmer, and he was like, "Oh, what you guys were doing there was very much the beginning of this sort of queer expression of art and writers." Kathy Acker performed there. Justin Vivian Vaughn read there because Chris Kovic brought. Greta Schneider showed films. A lot of people that went on to do and still do work.
And this is also
there.
in the middle of the AIDS crisis too.
Yes.
When there was a cloud over
Yes.
San Francisco that
Yes.
affected both the men and the women.
Yes, and I think for all of us, I mean, I moved to San Francisco at 18 years old in the middle of that, and in the middle of that grief and loss and urgency, and I think in a way it gave us permission to be like, we can fail if we want. We're going to just do what we need to do, and there's nobody that's going to make anything. We have to make anything we want to have happen, and it doesn't matter how long it lasts, because it's really urgent that, everything is really just now. I think for us it was, there was this pressure of time and permission to fail, which I think was
and
actually
also giving a new definition to what it meant to be bad.
Yes.
In a time where it was really hard to be bad because bad meant death.
Right. You mean in terms of outlaw, in terms of outside the law?
Outside the law.
That's where we all lived. I mean, it was, you knew the law was against you. I mean, you didn't have to, read subtext. They were saying, die, queers, or there was no visibility. And so I think there was this embracing of
and then ACT UP
being
and a lot of the AIDS response, it was men and women. It wasn't the separation in activism that had been historical.
That's true. I mean, I've been writing about the crashing of homocore into the 1989 Gay Pride, where it was homocore and Club Uranus and ACT UP, and they painted a car like a cop car, and they rented a tow truck and they towed it into the Gay Pride in sort of reference to Stonewall, and they had I remembered a baseball bat. It was all these punks with mohawks and stuff.
I'm sure that was Wade Palmer somewhere behind that wheel.
Oh yeah, and a bunch of people. Yes, Wade was definitely, he helped buy the car. Leslie Ma helped paint it, who was in my band. Justin Vaughn and I were talking about both that being a big moment for both of us on the sidelines. Justin Vivian joined the parade that day, that float, and Justin remembered there being a crate of high heels and bashing the cop car with the high heel shoe, and I remember there being baseball bats and them bashing it, and actually both were there. But it was a big moment. It was a big moment of us. We had been wandering the city a little bit lost, trying to find each other, and honestly, I would go to straight scene for my music and then couldn't find where to go for people that I might connect with sexual identity level, and then we all started to find each other and make art that was performance and political and funny.
So where did the filmmaking come in? How did you become a filmmaker?
Complete ignorance of how hard it was to make a film, and that mindset of, I don't see something that I want to see, so we need to make it. I mean, it was just that thing. Instead of complaining about, there's no one that looks like us in these films, and there's not this kind of expression, we just decided we needed to make it if we didn't see it. So Harry and I homeschooled ourselves on how to make a film, and Steakhouse produced it, who actually had some experience in working in a film, and Stanya Khan, was involved with with her dialogue and helping us with our rehearsing with each other.
What kind of equipment did you use?
We use these little consumer Sony TRV 900. They're like these little cameras. So anytime the cops...
It wasn't HD at that point, either.
No, it was probably less quality than a cell phone. It was like a really small standard definition image.
So it got finished, and now the storytelling, really, without overtly commenting on it.
Mm-hmm.
At no place do I remember it being gender specific.
No.
It was the audience had to enter into the frame
Yeah.
and see the two lead characters and let go of trying to figure out who they were other than who they were on the screen. And that was a pretty transgressive thing to do, even in indie filmmaking.
Yes.
Were you conscious that you were doing that kind of thing at the time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that was probably the biggest thing on the film, is that we were going to show this different expression of gender, but absolutely not explain it. That was very intentional. So they would call each other he, although they would also call each other she when there were authorities or, you know, the police were involved or whatever. So they went back and forth, but we wanted it to not be about that. Yeah.
It's interesting to me that historically the gay and lesbian community has always been critiqued heterosexual definitions of gender. So when boys would call each other girls, historically it didn't mean that the person thought they were a girl, or when a lesbian would say, "Hey guys," you know, you hear that all the time. You know, the guys, it would be, and so that kind of critique is not new, but it was very self-conscious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in this film, it seemed to me not on the screen, not self-conscious at all. This is just who these dudes were.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate that, because it's interesting when you have something you do intentionally, you know, whether or not it's going to land, and it was very satisfying that it landed pretty solidly with people, in that it invited people in. It seemed like that, you know, if they were going to allow themselves to be invited in, if they were going to do the extra work to kind of get into that frame, then they got this reward of breaking down that barrier of definitions and explaining oneself. I mean, for me, anytime you're not part of a heteronormative white mainstream culture, you're obligated to explain yourself. You're obligated to explain why you're on the screen, how you earn that screen time, what terrible thing you have to show the mainstream to make you worthy of watching. And I think we really wanted this simple story about a transformative friendship, and yet have the authenticity of the way they actually interacted with each other without making the audience.
Which, I mean, there's a lot of other discussion we could have about what happened with the success of the film and what the other ventures that you were involved in, and they're delicious stories. But I think this is a good point to talk about Sunset Stories, because in a way, Sunset Stories and its representation, while not genre-wise the same, it's very much, to me, watching it, I never see these people on the screen. You know, the people that I knew when I lived in Silver Lake and Echo Park, these were the people that were in Ralph's supermarket, but you never see them. So talk a little bit how you became involved in this film project.
Sure. So Ernesto and I met each other in Sundance 2003 when I was there with By Hook or By Crook, and he was there with Better Luck Tomorrow. And
what was his film?
Better Luck Tomorrow.
Okay.
He co-wrote.
Which I hated, by the way.
No, I know. But totally.
Only because of content, not because of the film was actually well made and cool.
Oh, totally. But we met each other, and then we realized we came from the same DIY queer punk background. So fast forward 10 years later,
And he's Hispanic?
No, actually, he's Filipino.
He's Filipino.
Yeah. And fast forward 10 years, we had been in LA, had worked on projects and worked in and out of the industry, and we're sitting in my living room with a bunch of filmmakers and other people, and he opened up.
Steakhouse there?
Steak wasn't there, no. He pulled open a punk rock encyclopedia that was put out, and there was TRIBE8 and all these other bands, and we just started talking about, we know how to make stuff without waiting for an industry stamp of approval. I mean, that's the one thing we know. Why don't we do that again?
You mean Power Up wasn't helping you?
No, they weren't helping me. And so we set about to, he and Valerie Stadler co-wrote the script, but very much it was that intention of, this is our world of friends, this is our world on the screen with the rules of our world, and again, they're not explained, they don't have to justify their existence, and they're dealing with other issues, which is hopes and dreams, dealing with a regret or an amends, those kind of issues were it was a very similar strategy of that.
And they're also dealing on a different level in gentrification, invisibility, representation.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
So had the script been written, or was it at that point decided that the two of them would work on a script? And were you sort of attached to it from the beginning? Or
Yeah,
no?
yeah. We talked about doing it together, Ernesto and I. He, his sister, because the story, on its concept level, is about. It's okay.